Good evening. Once again, I'm Stephanie Rule, live at MSNBC headquarters right here in New York City. And it is exactly 1 week until the Iowa caucuses, the first major nominating contest of the 2024 campaign. It will be a critical test for the twice impeached, 4 times indicted former president Donald J. Trump in his fight to go from Republican frontrunner to the official nominee. Over the next several days, he will bring his campaign to the courthouse. Tomorrow, he'll be at a hearing on his claim of presidential immunity, and on Thursday, at closing arguments in the civil fraud trial. Meanwhile, President Joe Biden is supercharging his attacks against Donald Trump, trying to fire up the Democratic base. Today, President Biden focused on shoring up support among black voters. He gave a speech from the pulpit of Charleston, South Carolina, a church there where a white supremacist shot and killed 9 people back in 2015. The president drew a direct line from the Civil War to the riot at the Capitol.
White supremacy. All it is a poison. Throughout our history, it's ripped this nation apart. This has no place in America. Not today, tomorrow, or ever. After the Civil War, the defeated Confederates couldn't accept the verdict of the war. They had lost. So they say they embraced what's known as the lost cause. A self-serving lie that the Civil War is not about slavery, but about states' rights. Now we're living in an era of a second lost cause. Once again, there's some in this country trying to turn a loss into a lie. The lie is about the 2020 election.
And over the weekend, the difference in Biden and Trump's messaging could not be more clear. Here's just some of what we heard.
For the first time in our history, insurrectionists had come to stop the peaceful transfer of power in America.
Millions of people are storming the United States. When you talk about insurrection, what they're doing, that's the real deal. That's the real deal, not patriotically and peacefully.
Trump's assault on democracy isn't just part of his past. It's what he's promising for the future.
Stay in those voting booths. You should stay there and watch. And if you see bags of crap coming into the voting areas, you got to stop it.
Look at the authoritarian leaders and dictators Trump says he admires.
President Xi of China, strong, smart, tough. Putin liked me. I got along. I got along with Kim Jong-un.
When he visited cemeteries, called dead soldiers suckers and losers.
But John McCain, for some reason, couldn't get his arm up that day. Remember? He goes,
after all we've been through in our history, from independence to Civil War.
The Civil War was so fascinating, so horrible, because I was reading something, and I said, this is something that could have been negotiated.
And on the 3rd anniversary of the attack on the U.S. Capitol, we also heard Trump say this about those rioters who were convicted.
You know what they ought to do? They ought to release the J6 hostages. They've suffered enough. They ought to release them. I call them hostages. Some people call them prisoners. I call them hostages. Release the J6 hostages, Joe. Release them, Joe. You can do it real easy, Joe.
He could have called them pardoned, but he didn't. He never helped them. And for fact's sake, not one single J6 rioter is a hostage. Those people kidnapped and being held by Hamas, they are hostages. A person convicted of a crime who is serving time is not a hostage. And for the record, the DOJ says more than 1,200 people have been charged in connection with the violence at the Capitol. More than 700 pleaded guilty, and more than 100 have been convicted at trial. With that, let's get smarter tonight with the help of our lead-off panel, and it is a good one. John Allen is here, senior national politics reporter for NBC News. Jason Johnson, a politics and journalism professor at Morgan State University and an MSNBC political contributor. And Michael Steele, former chairman of the Republican National Committee, former lieutenant governor of Maryland, and new host of the MSNBC show The Weekend, which kicks off this Saturday. Jason, I turn to you first. How effective was President Biden's speech today? He is trying to link our nation's troubled past to the fight for democracy and January 6th.
It was a nice speech for people who pay attention. Look, I I take any event that takes place at Mother Emmanuel very seriously. I was there when President Obama spoke after Dylann Roof assassinated people. I lost a very dear friend there. So I don't take what the president said lightly, and I don't think it was a disingenuous speech. But giving us this sort of the giant arc of history bends towards keeping Trump out of office, that doesn't work for most people beyond who was in that room. The problems that Joe Biden has in this 2024 election are not about whether people believe democracy is in danger. It's not about whether or not people believe that Joe Biden is a good guy. It's about galvanizing those people who feel that democracy overall hasn't worked very well for them. We can't shame those people. We can't punish those people. We can't give them ideological speeches. It's those on the margins. And so this speech was great for those who are already with him. I don't think that what he said or how he spoke is going to change the fact that you still have a lot of people who need to be spoken to directly by this president in the coming months to guarantee that he stays in office.
Well, he was speaking in South Carolina, Jim Clyburn's home state, in part because it was Clyburn and South Carolina that saved his campaign in 2020. John, how important do you think today's speech went? I'm feeling like Jason thinks didn't matter much at all.
Well, I think, as Jason suggested, he was preaching to the choir, that this is not persuasive for those, as Jason said, who don't believe that the system is working for them. And I think, if Biden's going to successfully make that message a persuasive one, he's going to have to connect the dot to how democracy can and should, or our form of government, our democratic republic, can and should and will serve the needs of the people who feel like they've been left out of the system. But, look, from a political level, obviously this is, a moment for President Biden to go to South Carolina to commemorate, to memorialize a horrible moment and then a moment of strength. But, South Carolina isn't where he's going to win this election. It's where he won the primary in 2020, but it is not a competitive state in the general election, and that's not where he needs to be delivering his political messages.
Michael, the Washington Post reports that former President Obama has some concerns about Biden's campaign, but I want to share what former Obama campaign manager David Plouffe said earlier tonight on our air.
Joe Biden's got the people around him who won the White House once. I think they can win it twice, but they just got to get everybody in the right seats. My sense is you see the schedules picking up. They've got more new advertising out. I think they're beginning to place people in the states. So I think the campaign is making strides.
Is it too early to be concerned? What do you think, Michael?
So I'm sitting here and I don't know in this vortex which way I'm going to actually turn. But here's the truth. As I see it, both Jonathan and Jason are right. And here's why. Joe Biden's problem is the choir. So yes, he had to go back to the church because he can't take the message to the street yet because he's got nobody out there to help him deliver it. It's not just Joe Biden here. The Democrats have to get their collective act together to decide they want this man to be the next president of the United States. This is not a complicated equation from where I'm sitting. As a Republican, it's not a complicated equation. So his problem is the choir. Plouffe is right. He's got the people around him, but I don't know what the hell they've been doing for the last 2.5 years. They look at everything through the prism of policy, living in a world in which it is sixth dimension politics. That's the level we're at. You showed the clip of the former president of the United States, just waxing and railing and just saying all kinds of BS, and there's no counter narrative to that. So yes, the image of this president, Joe Biden, going to Mother Emmanuel, the image of this president going to Valley Forge is an important start to a campaign that should have started probably 24 hours after he took the oath of office. Because Donald Trump didn't stop campaigning the entire 4 years, which is why you find the narrative so much more difficult, because when there's nothing in that echo chamber, guess what? The only thing people hear is the noise of the clanging bell. So now he's got to go to his choir to get them ready to go out and preach and sing this from the song sheet of lower inflation, lower cost of gas, infrastructure, And yeah, this little itty-bitty thing called democracy. Because at the end of the day, if that goes, the rest of this ish don't matter.
Okay, well, in addition to Donald Trump campaigning 24 hours a day, at some point, are people going to focus on the words he's saying? Because in addition to calling the Jan 6 rioters hostages this weekend, I want to share what he said about the U.S. economy and specifically the stock market tonight. Watch this.
We have an economy that's so fragile, and the only reason it's running now is it's running off the fumes of what we did, what the Trump administration. It's just running off the fumes. And when there's a crash, I hope it's going to be during this next 12 months, because I don't want to be Herbert Hoover.
Okay. So Donald Trump just said, Jason, he hopes the stock market crashes in the next 12 months. The stock market is not owned by Wall Street hedge fund fat cats. The stock market, who owns the stock market? Pension funds, insurance companies, 401ks, firefighters, teachers, nurses, who are checking their 401ks every night to figure out, can I retire in the next 5 years? But Donald Trump wants the market to crash, so the average American blames the current president. What does that say about A, Trump, and B, the American people, that we might fall for that, Jason?
Well, here's the thing, Stephanie. Donald Trump is a terrible guy, right? Like, that's not new. He says terrible things about people all the time. He doesn't care about most people in this country. Even the people who like him don't like him because they think he cares about them. They like him because they think he's going to go against the people who they don't like, who they can't get their hands around. But, Stephanie, I think there's something even more important here. The message is very clear. It's not like it's a difficult contrast. You have a competent guy in Joe Biden who has flaws, and then you have a monster and an incompetent dictator in waiting on the other side. So the issue is not how these two sound. The issue is, will the guy who's actually in office right now, Joe Biden, who has plenty of things to run on, lowest unemployment rate for African Americans, gas prices going down, all that stuff is great. But will he do the things he needs to do on the ground to make sure the people who support him can get out and vote? Is he doing more on voting rights? Is he doing more on putting people on the ground? Is he going to Michigan to talk to people there? Don't be the second Democrat to screw up because you don't go to Michigan. Look, Joe Biden can beat Donald Trump. The guy doesn't win the popular vote. But this is Joe Biden's to win, not Trump's to win, as long as Biden recognizes the resources that he has at his disposal. Trump can say whatever. It's not going to change how he's going to vote or the people are going to vote for him.
But, Michael, can't one argue Joe Biden is getting the job done, right? People say they vote with their pocketbook, and Republicans love to say the economy is terrible. If the economy is so terrible, then why on earth would Donald Trump be wishing that the stock market crashed?
Because he's an idiot. I don't know. It's just the dumbest thing in the world to say. I mean, think about it. The man says, I want to be a dictator and I want the stock market to crash. Okay, so you 0 for 2 in my book, Skippy. I mean, where do you think America, where does it go after this guy tells you he wants you to lose what you've earned in the market? All of you folks who for the first time got to play in the market because you got a little bling in the bank and you're going to put a little bit aside so that you can retire or even take a vacation. This guy wants you, right? This guy right here wants you to lose your life savings, your earnings. Why? Because it benefits him. It benefits him. Oh, and by the way, he wants to be a dictator. Part-time, because he only wants to do it for 24 hours. So look, folks, grow up here. Everyone just get their heads out of the pie that's in the sky, thinking that Donald Trump is going to offer you something you don't have. If you don't have it, he's damn sure not going to give it to you. So just stop pretending that the light bulb is going to go on and all of a sudden you're going to walk in the room and magically have all the things you've ever wanted. That's not what Donald Trump does. He's not Santa. He's not anything other than out for himself. And the moment you understand that, you kind of realize the guy that's sitting at 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue, yeah, he actually gives a damn about you. He's trying his best. I disagree with some of his policies, but you know what? It's a damn sight better than the guy who wants to be a dictator. Come on.
Oof. Mr. Allen, I had another question for you, but unfortunately, I am out of time. John Allen, Jason Johnson, Michael Steele, thank you all so much.